Rick Smith is the founder and president of Hope Story, a nonprofit that connects doctors and their patients whose child has received a Down syndrome diagnosis to resources, support, and stories of hope. For over 7 years, via his blog and social media, Rick has raised awareness worldwide about raising children with Down syndrome and is passionate about helping people use their story to help make a difference in the life of others. He lives in Texas with his wife, Abby, and his 3 children, Noah, Jackson, and Cone. He will speak to us about how a little bit of hope can go a long way and the need to bring hope and support to couples receiving a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. Rick, it's great to welcome you to the United Nations. You have the floor.
All right. Well, Your Excellencies, distinguished fellow panelists, including this world-class athlete here, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today on World Down Syndrome Day. I also want to thank the Holy See Mission and the Center for Family and Human Rights for co-sponsoring today's event. It's my honor and privilege to share with you today. I want to explain a little bit about what you just saw in that video, but before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about my story. This is a picture of me holding our son Noah for the first time. We were surprised to learn about 3 hours after he was born that he was born with Down syndrome. Shortly after this picture was taken, our OBGYN left the hospital without telling us that Noah had Down syndrome, and then called our pediatrician to come up to the hospital to share that news with us. The next morning, when our OBGYN came to the hospital, one of the first things she said to us was, "I'm so sorry," followed by the offer to prescribe my wife antidepressants, which she declined. Sadly, we never received the standard congratulations offered to new parents. And let me tell you, congratulations are always in order when a new child is born. Our OBGYN may have been sorry about our son, but we weren't. This is our family today. That is Noah there in the middle. He's 8 years old, and it's one of the biggest blessings in our life. In fact, we wouldn't change one single chromosome on him, except maybe the chromosome that affects how stubborn he can be sometimes, but my mom would probably say the same about me. You can also see our 5-year-old Jackson, our 1-year-old Cohen, and their mother, my beautiful wife, Abby, who is also a hardworking pediatrician. What I want to do today is tell you about a problem, a big one that some of my friends have already alluded to today. And the problem is that a lot of people who find out after prenatal testing that their child is going to be born with Down syndrome, they do not have a family picture that looks like this. You see, approximately 67% of mothers who learn after prenatal testing that their child will likely be born with Down syndrome choose to abort their child. This view that children with Down syndrome are unworthy of life doesn't just affect children in the United States. You need to know that in some countries, it's considered a curse to have a child with Down syndrome. You may have heard how Iceland is basically trying to eradicate Down syndrome. And here's what you need to know about that. I'm all for eradicating cancer or the flu or headaches. But when we talk about eradicating Down syndrome, we aren't talking about eradicating a disease. You understand? We're talking about eradicating an entire group of people like my son and his friends. So why are these termination rates so high? This is our friend Cece. When Cece's mom was pregnant with her, her doctor tried to convince her several times to abort her. While Cece's mom was late in her pregnancy, her medical professional told her that he knew doctors that would still terminate if that's what they really wanted to do. He cornered her without her husband present, asked her if that's what she really wanted, and suggested that he had a nurse who was, quote, very Catholic, and even that Catholic nurse decided to abort. She changed OBGYNs, and today Cece's a fun-loving little girl adored by her family. This is a family that I met last year that lives right here in the New York area. They told me when their doctor called to give them the news that their child would likely be born with Down syndrome, on that same phone call, the doctor also offered to schedule an appointment for an abortion for them. And so as you can see in this photo, they're glad they did not take their doctor up on that offer. You know, these mothers have had a negative experience with their medical professional. We had a negative experience with our medical professional. Michelle had a negative experience with her medical professional. As I have interacted with many families that have children with Down syndrome, this is not uncommon. You see, it's confusing and harmful for a new parent to receive that sort of negative response from their medical professional after receiving a Down syndrome diagnosis for their child. And I don't necessarily believe prenatal testing is the problem. In fact, I believe it can be helpful in some cases. I believe a large part of the problem is the negative interpretation of a Down syndrome diagnosis by a medical professional, which affects the way they deliver that diagnosis to their patients. In fact, I believe these negative interpretations and interactions with their patients are a contributing factor to parents terminating their child. So why do so many medical professionals talk about Down syndrome in such a negative way? Well, I believe it's primarily related to these two factors. The first, I don't believe most medical professionals receive adequate training on how to deliver a Down syndrome diagnosis in medical school or in their residency program. And therefore, they aren't able to deliver that news to families with accurate information in a hopeful way. The second problem is, I don't believe most medical professionals have a personal relationship to someone like my son or Karen, someone with Down syndrome. Many of them don't have firsthand knowledge of what it is like to be a parent of a child with Down syndrome, which, by the way, most parents I know raising a child with Down syndrome would say that while it is a unique journey, it's certainly not a sad one. So you basically have a good number of OBGYNs delivering this life-changing news to a family, yet they neither have the most accurate and current information nor any personal experience of what it's like to really live life and know someone with Down syndrome. They see Down syndrome as an anomaly and a negative thing which should be avoided if at all possible. You see, I'm a huge fan of medical professionals. Don't get me wrong, I'm married to one. We have a perinatologist on our board of our nonprofit, as well as an entire medical advisory board. And I don't think most doctors have bad intentions. I just believe no one has ever come alongside them and told them what a beautiful story it is to be a parent of a child with Down syndrome, and we want to change that. So last year we started a nonprofit called Hope Story with the goal of solving these two problems. Here's how we hope to do it. We believe that personal relationships plus training and resources for the medical community result in saved lives for children with Down syndrome, and we call this the Hope Advocate process. Our goal is to connect every OBGYN in America to, and even maybe one day the world, to a family raising a child with Down syndrome who can provide up-to-date educational resources to their doctor, as well as serve as a personal resource to them and their patients. We recruit, train, resource, and encourage these parents, and we call them Hope Advocates. Briefly, here's how it works. A family who has a child with Down syndrome will sign up to become a Hope Advocate on our website, hopestory.org, entering some information, uploading some photos, which we take and create a personalized Hope Kit for their family. They receive the Hope Kit, deliver those resources to their OBGYN at their next appointment, and share their personalized Hope announcements, which has their child's highlights and photo from the last year. The Hope Advocate leaves a personalized contact card with their doctor, which their doctor can then pass to any of their patients who has a child that may likely be born with Down syndrome. And the Hope Advocate can tell their doctor that they have been trained and they are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to provide friendship, support, and most of all, a connection of hope to them. And those new parents can then come to our website where they can view stories of families raising children with Down syndrome, learn more about our organization. Eventually, the goal is for the new parent to connect with a Hope Advocate who will be trained to share their story with them. You know, I think a lot of parents feel alone. Their doctor seems to view having a child with Down syndrome in a negative way. They may not have any friends who have a child with Down syndrome, and they likely never picture themselves as parents of a child with Down syndrome. And listen, when people feel alone, they can also feel fearful and hopeless. And when people don't often make the best decisions when they feel hopeless. And our hope is that these connections can replace some of the fear that a new parent may have with hope, and a little bit of hope can go a long way. And see, we want every parent whose child receives a Down syndrome diagnosis to have a friend who can sit across the table and tell them they aren't alone. Ultimately, we hope that parent brings their child to full term and the Hope Advocate process can continue. So what you saw in the video is an idea of what we hope to duplicate all over the United States. You know, the Bible tells us that God knitted this little boy together in his mother's womb, and that he was made in the image and the likeness of God. This little boy, Noah, is fully human, and because of that, he has profound worth, dignity, and purpose. You see, a person's worth doesn't come from how many chromosomes they have or don't have, or what they can or cannot do, but because they are an image bearer of the one who created them. And because of that truth, every person in every nation is worthy of life. You know, when you walk into a bookstore and you browse the aisles of books there, you're greeted with rows and rows of covers of books. All those books longing for you to pick them up and enjoy it. You know, often we judge these books by their cover. If the cover looks attractive and fun and well-designed, we pick it up. If it doesn't, we may walk right past it, choosing to never experience the story contained in its pages. It's been said you should never judge a book by its cover because in doing so, you would miss out on the joy of reading many of life's classic stories. Being a parent of a child with Down syndrome is like reading a classic novel that I never knew I wanted to read. In the bookstore of life, I have to admit I would have never chosen to pick up the story of raising a child with Down syndrome based on the cover. But now that I've experienced this life-changing story that I never knew I wanted to read, I'm so glad I have. And I can say that this story has changed my life and the life of countless others for the better. And just like any good story, I want to share it with others so that they will not miss out. Sadly, so many people in life make a choice to close this book before they ever turn a page. Our goal is to help more people not miss out on the joy and beauty of this story by helping replace their fear with hope. I think the Hope Advocate process has the ability to literally change the world. If you want to learn more, you can do it at hopestory.org. You can send me a message through our contact form. It'd be my privilege to connect with you. Thank you for your time, and I hope you will join us in connecting medical professionals and families to stories of hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for highlighting for us how important it is for medical professionals to receive adequate training on delivering to parents a Down syndrome diagnosis and to develop personal relationships with those with Down syndrome, and for the work we are doing to remedy that issue through the Hope advocacy process. I'm hoping that all of us here today might be able to become auxiliary Hope advocates, helping to spread proper information and develop deeper bonds with Karen and Sophia and Addison and Noah and all those with Down syndrome. And even though it is more than 8 years overdue, from all of us, the most hearty congratulations to you and Abby on the blessing of Noah.